Are we recording? So it's okay now? Great.
You want to do introductions now?
I guess so. Let's do self-introductions though. My name is Neall Raemonn Price. I've been freelancing for the last 9 years now, God. But really only actively for the last 5 years or so is when I really started getting into the biz. I've been storytelling games ever since I was 16. And so when I got into it, I started with a lot of homebrew games and D6 Star Wars, and started really storytelling Exalted and Demon and getting into the World of Darkness and that sort of thing that way. I ran a Requiem game the day it came out in 2004, and I ran a campaign of it for about 6 months thereafter, twice a week, so it seems longer. And I'm currently the Scion developer over at Onyx, and I have written more storytelling sections than any author at Onyx. That's my claim to fame.
I'm Dave. I've been freelancing about 2 years longer than Neil. I've been storytelling games since I was 8.
Just
I'm one game line off being the only person to have written for every Chronicles of Darkness game. And since Made the Ascension First Edition came out, the longest I've gone without actively running some form of mage, be it purple or blue, is about 3 months. Jeez.
I'm Rose Bailey. I'm Onyx Path's development producer. I also develop Vampire the Requiem. I oversee the world of the Chronicles of Darkness, excuse me. I oversee the Chronicles of Darkness. And I'm also working on my own creator-owned game for Onyx Path, Cavaliers of Mars. I've really been storytelling a long time. I don't know exactly how long. Probably more years than I'm willing to admit I've been alive. And I've been freelancing for 10 years. Got my start on World of Darkness Urban Legends. So.
Mike Hayes. I've been running games since 8 as well. Masquerade since 12, which is well below the suggested age range.
Don't worry, I got it.
Didn't do it, everybody.
And I've been running games with the Wrecking Crew for probably about 6 years now.
That sounds right.
That sounds right.
Okay, likewise, I've started running games around 16, and various different systems, but mostly Masquerade. And I've been spending the last 5 years myself actually running with the Wrecking Crew, and that's why I can move the fame right now.
So I guess I'm heading this panel since I'm sitting at the end.
Yeah.
So, the way we did this the last 2 years was rather than just like launching into it and being like, what makes a good storyteller, which I guess we could do, but...
See, if we do that, then Dave and I are going to disagree.
Yeah, which is not always a bad thing, but we can all get very long-winded. So why don't we flip the format a little bit and do a bit of Q&A?
Oh yeah, let's do that. That worked pretty well last
All right, so this is a panel on how to storytell in the world of darkness and what good storytelling tips and tricks are. What are your guys' problems? What do you have issues with? What are your theoretical issues you do not have stuff with? So, front.
I run games where everyone in the group is related and family members, and I run games where everyone wakes up with amnesia and on the run from the law. Other than those two scenarios, I have eventually, within 3 or 4 sessions, met an obstacle where the characters have no logical reason to stick together or even like each other.
Okay. The way I solved that is kind of well, I solved that first, and I'll just launch into it first, and you guys can give your own stuff, I guess. The way I generally solve those things is kind of twofold. So my favorite White Wolf World of Darkness game, period, is Orpheus, which is actually not really a World of Darkness game. It's kind of off in the distance. But the reason you're all together is because you're paid to be together. That's your job. You show up for a paycheck. It doesn't really matter if you don't like each other. You do it. It's your job. But in modern World of Darkness games and other stuff, that doesn't always work. Giving them a common cause, a common purpose, is generally the best tactic I can find. If they're all like a member of a hunter cell, if they're all a member of whatever, finding a common enemy for them to fight and a common cause kind of keeps them together, I think, through obstacles that may crop up. But in a general way, the best way I've always found to get around it is to take a page out of Fate and to do shared character generation and to work in links between the characters previously. So they know each other and they're friendly and they have reasons to be with one another, even if they might disagree on a common obstacle that might pop up. It's not all you meet in a tavern somewhere, it's you know each other, you like each other, you're together for reasons. Presumably everyone at the table is together out of a shared and common interest and a shared common like, they're all friends. So the characters can be in the same way.
In Vampire the Requiem 2nd Edition, that was one of the questions that loomed really large in development was, why do vampires hang out together? So, you know, we tried to answer it in different ways throughout the book, but one cool thing that we did was we have a section called Building the Ladder in the storytelling section, and you go through a series of phases developing ties to NPCs and other player characters. And I hack that for other stuff I run now. It really, really works nicely. Another game that I think provides good tools for it is Smallville, which is a little hard to get now. But that was Margaret Weiss Productions' game, where you've got sort of a life path system that weaves your characters together. So I guess what I'm saying is I like to do it around the table pre-game. You know, usually I put a whole session into character creation and a lot of emails besides that. So yeah, definitely like to build that web pre-game. You have kind of a different approach, right?
I always have a different approach to roses. It's just what it is. I try to have the first story in a long-running chronicle be why these characters are hanging around together. Sometimes it's because they're forced to hang around with one another, that they've been assigned to hang around. Sometimes it's a question of making the setup for the Chronicles sort of be them against the world, so that they can only counter one another.
That's something I agree on, actually. My best vampire game ever was 2 characters, and basically it was them against the world.
That then leads to like the secondary problem of what you do when you get new players.
Yeah, that does.
The thing that I've had to spend the most time negotiating in and out of character with my players and their characters was when I added 2 characters to a game that had been going on for 3 years, because the existing character group would not realistically trust anybody else to join them, and we had to. It's almost like we were designing. It got to the point where we were nearly dictating what had to happen in a particular game session in order to get the chronicle moving again. So yeah, I have experienced what you're going through. And also, at a certain level, you just have to tell your players, look, if you don't, then there's no game.
People will often say, "Oh, I'm just playing my character," and it's like, well, maybe your character's not so much of a dick.
You guys?
So I echo all of the stuff here, particularly the fate system kind of integration. That's a really wonderful method of character creation. The other element that I sometimes use is when I was in a personality psychology class at one point in time. They laid out this box of sort of like things that you know and other people know about you, things that only you know about you, things that only other people know about you, and then things that are obscured from both. Excluding kind of that last box, I find that sometimes an interesting way, particularly if you're doing more of sort of like a politically themed game or an espionage themed game, is for characters to build connections that only one character knows about and that only one potential player knows about. Reasons for keeping them around, reasons for protecting them if things get tough, that perhaps serve their own interests, but at the same time tend to create that glue. The other thing that I would personally place emphasis is in post-development on sort of individual character conversations, discussions that aren't necessarily geared towards action-based, but are geared towards individual character sort of relationship, things like that. I think players can come up with really unique and interesting ways to link their characters together.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Mike is saying and all the rest of them. You know, especially what we've seen happen in Fate, that comes up quite a bit. You know, the only thing I can say is like this kind of stems from character creation anyway. As long as you have everybody involved, like helping each other, find reasons why they're together. Because then they're going to be stuck because they're building that group together. And I think that's usually a good way to go. It's a little more difficult, I guess, if they're coming from different parts of the world to come together. But I'm sure even during character creation, they could find a reason why they would stick with another person.
But really asking that question up front really helps.
Next.
Can we also ask questions about Exalted, or is that all from the table?
I wrote Exalted.
It is
What, is it about storytelling Exalted?
Yes.
Sure.
Sure. I storytell Exalted.
I have in the past as well.
Wait, it's specifically 3rd edition. That's okay.
Sure.
It's like
that's
there's-
why I wrote
I didn't know. But because like you guys just had a bunch of like Will of the Darkness examples, and then just Exalt is like left in the cold, and I wasn't sure. But anyways, my question in regards to storytelling, one thing which I'm like having problems with, because I do have the third edition Exalted book is coming up with good opposition to challenge like even low level Exalted players, because I don't really have a lot of tools to work with given the book. There are definitely tools there which I can take opposition and then scratch off a name and write another name and use that.
Right, but it doesn't have a storytelling section, so, okay. The question, can everyone hear him from the back? Okay, cool. Yeah, so, Dave, you've story told 3rd edition more than I've story told 3rd edition.
My approach to statting monsters in Exalted, like to build creatures to face people,
Not
because
just
there's
like
not that many
creatures,
examples.
but just like opposition in general. Like,
Okay, well,
when your main fighter can punch a steel gate down, like how do you really challenge them?
I mean,
the main way that I challenge my my Exalted players, because they're Solars and the other Exalted types aren't, we've got like, I mean, Exalted 3rd has a couple of examples, but there's not like full rule sets for it, is to have. So I had the Dragon Gunner is more of a political threat. It's not so much the individual terrestrial exalts, it's more the country that they run. And then the main antagonists of my Solar Exalted game are another Solar, they're a different circle of souls. So the way that you challenge like a Dawn-cast Solar is to have an enemy Twilight-cast Solar who disagrees with what they should be doing, and who is building his own like mechanized army.
I was thinking about that, like that's where I was going with it, because I do have rules for that, but I wasn't sure if there was like an alternative.
whenever I ran Exalted, I found that I could find no opposition to my player group that was as bad as them themselves.
Amen.
Exalted and a lot of other World of Darkness, and other World of Darkness games, because not a lot of other, it's not a World of Darkness game, but in a lot of games, you will find that the best thing to do is to smack your players in the face with consequences of what they do. Especially Solars will carve a bloody but sunlit swath across the face of creation. And just, I would really like to remind them of that every once in a while and remind them what they did. I remember a Solar in my game wanted to make a point. So he used the biblical spell that turns water into blood. And he did it on top of a Grey Falls, which is a giant waterfall. So he did that, and he made a point, and everyone was like, whoa, you know, that. And then I was like, so you realize you just like poison their water supply and like kill off all the fish in the water, right? And I was like, so I like, they like walked through the city, and there were like dozens of people just like dying because the poor of the people fish so much from that lake there. Just by their nature, by their divine nature, they will cause tons of consequences. They will cause tons of stuff. And if they're just mowing down the opposition, more and more opposition will be thrown at them, and eventually it will get to be so big that they can't really deal with it, or it will just be something that just goes around and proceeds into the problem. If they're trying to fight the guild or something, eventually the guild is just going to try to buy them off. Or if they're trying to fight, and actually that applies to everything. If they're trying to fight a Death Lord, eventually the Death Lord's going to be like, hey, what can I give you to not try to kill me? And if the answer's nothing, then they're going to drop Juggernaut on them or something. So eventually in Exalted, and this was very difficult in the second edition, the third's a little better about it, you have to get to a point where either their consequences are kind of swallowing them up, or they will hit something that they cannot hit hard enough, because it will hit them back harder. So, yeah. The gentleman there in the front.
I'm having trouble with ending scenes. Sometimes the scene kind of peters out, kind of runs out of energy and just kind of fails. Other times I cut it off too soon. Like say, I want more, or I need something else to accomplish. And there's also time between. So how much time should there be between scenes before you kick off the next one and set it up?
Those Wrecking Crew guys?
When you say, sorry.
I honestly tend to cut scenes early myself, but I generally like that. I always like it when a scene leaves something left unsaid to follow up on later. So I wouldn't necessarily view that as a problem, but if your players do, yeah, that does complicate things.
Do you want to take it first or should I?
You go ahead.
When you say ending scene, what exactly do you mean?
You've set the scene, they're going through their actions, and at some point...
So just ending a scene?
Yeah, ending a scene. So
okay.
Sometimes I'll say, okay, I think they're done. All right, we're done, moving on. And someone say, no, I need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
There are times when sometimes they get bogged down in minutia, things that we can sort of just hand wave, but they're like, no, I want to talk about this. And it's like, you're the only one. There's 4 other people here that are not interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean by kind of peters out, where the number of people interested in the scene decreases until it's kind of one-on-one, and I'm trying to move on to get everyone else involved.
My thought would be that if you have specific goals that you set for a scene, you'll always know when a scene is done for you, which will prevent it from petering out too soon. Now, I think it's not to say, I think the spirit of what Rose is saying is you always want to leave them wanting more, which is not a scene necessarily petering out so much as it's leaving them on a cliffhanger, right? Which I think is excellent. You always want to do that. Ultimately, I think when you've completed the goals of the scene that ends, if you have a player who's interested in continuing some element of that scene, then you can work it into the next scene as one of the goals of that. But you want to keep that brisk pace, I think, particularly when you're, working in a multi-scene game over a couple hours.
Right, you want to keep the energy up.
Absolutely, yeah. But you can keep that energy up by migrating goals that players create from one scene to another, and I think that gives them a sense of ownership as well.
So we think that adding a sense of a time that things have to be done. Even when we go around in the real world in groups, you have one person who wants to, hey, I want to stop in this store, but the rest of the group, we got to make it to the movies. You can basically put it on the players to help pull the rest of them along.
I think if your players are looking for a specific thing out of the scene, like a piece of information or whatever, it can be injurious to the tone if you overuse it, but don't be afraid of just a brief bit of exposition. Being like, if you're going back and forth with the player and you're doing it in character, if you need to cut a scene short, don't be afraid to be like, he says blah, 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 and just give them not a huge info dump, and again, use it judiciously, but a brief little bit of that can satisfy what the player's actually asking for and move it along. And that's the thing, they're absolutely right, you need to keep things moving along. So, okay. Gentlemen.
I am a massive Requiem fan, so thanks for that. But I've encountered a problem where, say we're 4 players, and they each have 3 touchstones, and you end up having this really large supporting cast of 12 different characters. And I don't really want them to die out in the periphery because they're supposed to be like this thing that cements your humanity and stuff like that. So just how do I balance when I it goes for other games also, like when I have a very large supporting cast, and I want to keep them all involved, but you have to.
That can be very challenging. The question is about managing large supporting casts.
Yeah.
Honestly, I find I get a lot of mileage out of moving stuff into downtime. Concept I picked up from LARPing is downtime actions.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't necessarily have time to get something into a session, but you send an email to the players afterwards and you go, hey, so you run into your touchdown at 7-Eleven. What happens there? Stuff like that, and you just get a few sentences, and you can really keep the sense that these characters are engaged in the chronicle without running scenes. I would recommend not going up to 3 touchstones if you've got if you've got 4 players. That's the other thing I would suggest. But yeah, large supporting cast, especially as a chronicle gets longer, you end up with more and more supporting NPCs. So I definitely see where you're coming from there.
Vampire and Southern Touchstone.
A Slurpee.
Why wouldn't you do that?
Oh, boom!
Somebody just asked what a touchstone is.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rose. It's your
No,
game.
I was passing to you.
Oh yeah, a touchstone in Vampire the Requiem is a person, generally a person, but I think it can be a place or thing as well.
Yeah.
That you go to specifically remind yourself of your humanity and to act as a grounding mechanism and a stability mechanism for it.
It's one of the ways you can get willpower back, along with your mask and your dirge, which are facets of your personality.
Yeah, so they have been adopted in certain other games. I believe Werewolf also has touchdowns.
Yeah.
Changeling's gonna have a bit better at touchdowns.
A lot of Deviant's prototype mechanics revolve around the idea.
Yeah, you need something to remind yourself specifically of humanity. We're adopting a little bit of that in Scion, which is in Darkness again. Yeah, the idea of this. Yeah, this is something that reminds you of your humanity when you have something Okay, other questions?
Actually, quick comment there.
Oh, sorry.
Do you use Roll20 at all?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've noticed is usually pretty productive in handling very large casts is I'll set up a large town map with individual locations that function as tokens, and then the individual touchstones and other NPCs. And then I find that grouping them in that way tends to help the players who are visualizing the map think, this is the way that we can get the most bang for our buck. By us all interacting with 4 touchstones at once or something like that,
Oh, man.
or 5 NPCs there. The other element is in the blue booking that I think Rose was talking about. I often like to drop keywords, and then those keywords will come up later, like, he's working on an old book right now. Well, 3 scenes later, well, maybe that old book might tell you something, and then that gives them the opportunity to visit the touchstones. And again, if you've linked it up to these locations, say, in a visual kind of dimension, a chance to interact with 2 or 3 other touchstones or 2 or 3 other cast members at the same time.
Yes, in the green button. On her arm. You.
Oh,
Yes.
right. How do you find a balance between having a very, say, combat specified player who's really into the combat scene and having a bunch of players that aren't?
Very painfully, and a lot of, I try to pick out those players individually, and I try to understand what they want out of the combat specified game. And if every once in a while, just you can throw them a combat, that's fine. But I find that a lot of those players are satisfied by mechanisms that allow them to feel big, or allow them to feel powerful, or allow them to and especially in World of Darkness ways, to be violent, especially. Greg Stolze has a very good quote about the World of Darkness. In the World of Darkness, there are no fights, there's just beatdowns. And Rose will tell you a little bit more about it, but the combat engine's rather deadly in World of Darkness. And so if you get ambush on someone, you're going to wallop them.
So yeah, if you look at Chronicles of Darkness specifically, Defenses are fairly strong, but aggression often overpowers. One of the things we have in Chronicles of Darkness 2nd edition is the down and dirty combat system, which lets you get a combat scene out of the way in one roll. And if your player is looking for, a way to be violently empowered, that'll often work for them. It's a slightly different affair if what they really want is the round-by-round sensation of combat, and other people don't want to participate in that. In that case, I would say that you need to, or that I would approach it in terms of being equitable. It's like, okay, well, you get to have the political manipulation scene, and then after this, Brian gets to have the combat scene, and just present it as catering to different people's interests. And you were talking about people who build their characters for combat. Well, the nice thing is, in both Worlds of Darkness, characters really get their own chances for spotlights. So again, you can have the political scene for Megan and the combat scene for Brian, and I don't know these people, these are not real people.
Actually, my combat specific player is Brian.
So yeah, I think presenting it sort of out of character, we're going to do something for each of your characters. I think that works very well.
Yeah, Dave Brookshaw actually once told this to me in a very in a very wise way. Yeah, you did. You said never be afraid to directly address the player.
Yeah.
And this works in both text and storytelling.
So in this kind of situation, like, because we've opened the Exalted Door, so one of my players just he has a Dawncast with the fighters, and he just really enjoys the combat system. So so in the metagame of our group, he accepts the fact that he will occasionally. He will have to be his character will have to be grumpy because he's not fighting anything for 2-3 sessions at a time, but eventually he will get his chance to have a fight. and when he has a fight, the guy who's playing the diplomat, who has the combat ability of a cabbage, despite being so, accepts the fact that he has to run and hide or he'll die. So, it works out. You just have to be. You just have to talk to your players about it.
And then occasionally you get the player who builds for combat and then avoids combat wherever possible.
Yeah, they're just weird. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If I need it, I don't want to have to do this. You guys have any?
So we have this player in the game that we usually run, and his name is Johnny. And he's the only guy I've ever seen who could have potentially, had the rules allowed it, had a -8 social dice pool penalty. Not an 8 penalty, but an actual dice pool of -8 total dice.
How do you even roll a negative die?
I don't know. I mean, it was a lot of chance dice anytime you talked with anybody. And he creates these elegant combat monsters that just stomp over everything, right? And so I guess the first thing is I'd go over here, give the players what they want, ultimately, right? You can't give the person the option of creating a combat monster and then deny them the opportunity to do that, right? But I'd also, one of the things you stress with Johnny is consequences, which is the same thing Neal was talking about. I think that's a very kind of exalted issue too, is that what do you do when you have someone who just can walk over everything? Well, as soon as they start walking over everything, you show them what they're stepping on. And as soon as that happens, you get one of two reactions, I find. Either they continue to walk because they don't care.
And they're like, shit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Or it's like, all right, this is exactly what I was looking for. Or they stop. Now, we had a situation where Johnny kept walking. So eventually, one of the things that was really successful is showing the consequences of his behavior not on him, but on the other players. And they really quickly curtailed that. And he got what he wanted, and ultimately they also reined him in.
Yeah, they sure did.
I'm sorry, man.
Oh yeah. So Johnny has matured a lot lately.
Yes, yeah.
We're from rampaging vampire to complicated werewolf now. Yeah, he's still a killing machine. Don't get me wrong, but he has a, when you build his character well, he has complexities built in there, and some of those complexities might actually stop him from clawing the face off the guy. So.
And this is, I mean, I think on some level this is a, like a Dale Carnegie thing, right? You show them that they can be better, so to speak. Like, you say, well, really, I'd like to see you playing a character that also has this dimension to it, because I think you do a really good job there, even if it's not the truth at all. Because then, you start to bring out these other aspects, and, one time he played an antique dealer, and it worked out pretty well. So, I mean, he's,
How many antiques got broken?
a lot by the end of the game, but strangely none from him.
So, next we have the right
Gentleman in the back.
So this somewhat plays off of the question you guys just answered as well as one earlier, probably very But say you have a group that has one character that's built to be a very powerful combat character, and he continues as you gain experience, say, in Tools of Exalted, continues to increase their potential in combat, adjusting their dump stats, so to speak. And the rest of your social cast continues to get better and better at the social combat aspect. How do you handle threat escalation so that the combat character continues to feel challenged, but that you don't just instantly vaporize the rest of the players?
Well, I think part of that comes down to the idea we were talking about spotlights earlier. When you have a fight with all of the with everyone in there, it doesn't have to be with everyone in there. Like if people are unequal in terms of their capabilities, you do not need to challenge them equally. You can challenge them unequally and I mean, if it can be an in-setting thing. The Dogcast is supposed to be the champion, the omni-tactical battle hydra who can handle anything that you throw at them. And the rest of the Exalted are supposed to be no slouches, but they're no dawns either. And that's fine. Like if you have roles in the party that are clearly defined roles, just being out of character, being like, yeah, I'm not gonna send the brutish thug to seduce the princess unless she's really into it. Or maybe the prince is really into brutish thugs. I don't know. You use the right tool, the right challenge for the right person. But if you also need to challenge the rest of the party with a bunch of mooks while the fighty guy fights the big monster, that's fine too.
One thing I actually have done a lot is the providing different threats within a single scene. As Neal's saying, some that are more matched to the less combat-y players. Let the diplomat deal with an assassin or something, while the two brutish characters are slugging it out.
Yeah, that's essentially what I do as well. Like, in a game with like one big combat character, there will normally be like to use video game, there'll be a boss monster with minions, and if part of my game's social contract is like, if the combat player identifies the fact that one of the enemies has been built for him, then he should go deal with it. Otherwise, there will be story consequences where something horribly outmatched meets one of his companions, and the other player will be upset with him.
Have you ever tried having a combat with like multiple goals, like you have your combat character fight the combat guy, and you have your guy go around and like break into the safe while
Oh
Yes,
yeah, that's a lot of fun.
All the time. In fact, I designed a system around that. Around doing that very thing where everyone in combat gets something to do that they can excel at and contribute to the general combat route. And that's a great way to do it, is to make sure that Star Wars actually does this really, really well. Weirdly enough, you have
Fantasy Flight Star Wars.
Fantasy Flight Star Wars, because you have starship combat, which you think would just be between the pilot and the other pilot of the other starship, but there's roles within the actual starship and within the starship combat mechanism that allow you to go and do other stuff within there. Like, if you have a hacking character, they man the comm system and they are trying to hack the other ship and defend against the enemy hacker. If you have a mechanical character, they are running around constantly fixing the crap that's breaking on the ship because it's getting hit by laser bolts. If you have a talkie character, they have something to do, and I forget what it is right now, but they have some, I think they like cheerlead the crew basically, and just make everyone a little bit better just by coordinating the efforts throughout the ship itself. So, and that's not World of Darkness, obviously, but you have characters who are fit for certain roles, and going along with the spotlight means that you can shift the spotlight within the scene itself to highlight what their strengths are. So yeah, multi-role and multi-goal combat is an excellent way to address that issue. So if you have a talking character or a social character, make them yell at the mooks and just say, do you really want to be this jerk ass? And they're like, no, I don't. No, I'm just here to collect a paycheck, and then we'll go home. We're all here just here to collect a paycheck, in fact. So.
And I think one of the ways to sort of facilitate what Neal's talking about, and this is something that I think often escapes us as we imagine scenes, is sort of thinking in 3 dimensions. So like putting catwalks in places, separating things up by rooms. Yeah, separating things up by rooms, you know, like putting obstacles in the way so that you can also easily parse the characters into those social, mental, and physical groups so that they can do what they do best. And sometimes, based on what you're saying, stick a thorn in their side too. You know, like you separate out the physical character and then you have them talk. You know, or you separate up the guy who's primarily mental, and then you know you have him face down a house cat, which you just can't take out. That convinces him to buy a dot in firearms, or the other guy to buy a dot in persuasion, or you know that sort of
He
thing.
has to chase after that house cat because on the house cat collar is the USB drive.
There you go.
Yes,
Yeah.
very good.
So I want to riff off something. This is like a storytelling like pet gem of mine, I guess. Not really a pet peeve, but something I like to do. And I want to get your guys' take on it now that I have a bunch of storytellers here and I can wax to a crowd. I never keep in-character secrets secret out of character. Like when you're talking about separating up the party, I don't run separate scenes with people like passing note cards. I don't do that ever.
That's too much work.
It is too much work, and I
And then people
prefer.
start texting.
Yeah. No, enough of that. I don't split the party with scenes and like that sort of. Even if I'm running over a text game, which I never do anymore, but you know, presumably if I did, I wouldn't do that. And if a character has an in-character secret, like I diabolarize my sire, or I diabolarize your sire, or I generally don't have the players know that between each other, even if their characters don't, because that means when there's something that pops up that references that one character will be oblivious to, the players get the ability to play off that in character rather than out of character. Do you guys agree, disagree?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, definitely
My 5-year running mage game now, that there are horrible dark secrets that are going to cause the death of the entire cabal, that one of the characters is keeping from the other 4, and all the players know. All the players have known all along. It's just a thing. In fact, some of the players enjoy deliberately steering their characters into the path of it, knowing what they're doing. Which I think, if you can get players that do that, you're set up for the Chronicles of Darkness.
Players who like getting into trouble, very good fits for Chronicles.
Oh yeah. The mechanics even support it.
Oh, definitely. The mechanics encourage it a lot.
Yeah. Gentleman right there.
How do you handle a character or a player who says he loves to play, talks about the story all week, but says maybe 2 words in game?
Oh, those people.
And you kind of just like deer in the head.
Question is how you deal with a player who appears to be very into the game, but actually in play.
They're alone. They do nothing.
Yeah.
Wallflowers.
Yeah.
Good band.
how do I deal with them? Again, my first impulse is just directly address the problem. Is take them aside, be like, hey, you know, what's the, like, do you not feel engaged? You do that. But they're like, no, I'm engaged. I'm really into it. It's like, no, you're not. Like, but as to how to actually directly engage them in play, I throw stuff at them, and I will throw that. I'm like, what is your character doing? And they're like, and it's like, come on, what is your character doing? Or their touchstone will run into them in the 7-Eleven. Why are they there? I don't know. You tell me why they're there in the 7-Eleven.
I'm telling you, Coke Slurpees are awesome.
But they can't drink them.
Yes, they can. They have to spend a VTech.
Oh, God.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it for a Slurpee.
Okay, so.
Or instead of
well, there you go. I just made the wallflower pipe up. But that's the thing is I like to challenge them, and I like to try to get them going, get them moving out, and yeah, different strokes for different folks. I mean, if they want to stay a wallflower and you're comfortable with them being in your game, and they say they enjoy it, then maybe you should take them at their word. But
many times I have just straight up asked another player, like, okay, so it's been 2 hours now since you last had a scene. What would you like to do?
Talking about
Stare
point
at him until he actually has his character do something, even if it's not involving the other player characters. Like if he wants to go talk to an NPC, that's fine, just as long as he actually does something.
It also could be an anxiety issue, because I know like a lot of people who are new to role playing, like, you know, they're afraid of losing or screwing up or something, so.
In this particular player's case, definitely not, but yeah, it can be that.
well, in true World of Darkness fashion, the thing to make them do is to make them lose real hard, but in a fun way. I mean, you gotta, when you do that, you run the risk of making the players feel upset or feel like they're being ganged up on. So,
for shy players,
yeah,
for shy players, I would let it drop within a game session and then devote my planning resources to giving them a major plot line in the next story, and talk to them in between games about what would be good for their character to be starting to do, that kind of thing. The direct confrontation of, like you say, if people are actually uncomfortable with piping up in the middle of the game when there's big egos flying around, then don't force it, because you'll just make them retreat further into their shell.
So not to necessarily speak generally, but to speak specifically to this point, it seems like you've potentially got an opportunity in the sense that this person wants to talk about the game. So you could definitely say something like, well, so, you've seen this is where things go. What do you think you might do about this kind of thing? Because they're perfectly willing to talk to you. And then you can use that as a prompt during the next game session to say, wouldn't this be a good time to do what we talked about over, and then you could possibly hook them in like that. And then once they get used to that system, that structure, they use that as a platform for what they're going to do.
I've even dropped major information plot hooks.
Mm-hmm.
And his is the only character that knows. And all he's got to do is turn to my brother, who he's known for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's not like he doesn't know him, they're not comfortable together. And just be like, oh, I know this. This is what we've been looking for.
Is he shy, or do you suppose it's sort of a movie situation of watching?
Not. But you'll give him something in game, and he'll just be like, okay.
Huh.
This is the major information you've been looking for. Okay.
Or he'll bring it up out of character.
Huh.
That's a point blank conversation, my friend.
yeah.
You're past the point of prodding it. You just point blank tell them.
Yeah, just drag them out
That might be better.
front and center on the stage. Here's the microphone.
The related issue that I've had with very shy players is when there's one person who lets the other players talk over them. And let's face it, it's normally lets the other players talk over her.
That's true.
And Yeah, I have in the past actually in Chronicles of Darkness given beats to the guys to shut up.
Wow. You pay players to shut up.
Hey, bribery will work. Do you use group beats?
Yeah.
Well, then the whole party benefits. But yeah, no, I'm actually glad you brought that up. There is a gendered issue to it, and a lot of times, a lot of women, especially who have been writing for me, have come to me and been like when we were talking about mechanics, they're like, yeah, I would like this mechanic, but I feel like if I tried to implement a game, I would get shouted down. And as a storyteller, it is a collaborative storytelling exercise, a collaborative game. Everyone's contributing into it, but it is incumbent upon you, especially the way we run our system, to ensure that everyone does have a voice, and it has as much of a voice as they want to. And so, if you just need to tell a player to shut up and let another one speak, maybe don't be that direct about it to put the other player in the spot, but you gotta give them opportunities to actually find their voice, because it may be, they are trying, and it's difficult with the other players talking to them or being dominant personalities.
So that tangent over tangent for tangents, actually.
We have time for, we have 10 minutes left, so we have one or two more.
I think every GM has had the what the fuck moment when their players pull something off. Or try to pull something off that just comes out of left field. And given that you guys were involved in White Wolf and Onyx Path, I'd like to thank you for helping my group actually train for that. Pathfinder GMs have cursed us soundly for attacking point B when they want us to start at A, or Q, or whatever. What are some tricks for handling that? Because getting caught flat-footed, I mean, you can always pause for a moment, but a lot of times you're in a scene where, holy shit, and they don't want to stop because they're really engaged.
Well, so the question was, what do you do when a player throws you a curveball, a really curvy, I don't know baseball, but something completely what the fuck, as you said.
And you don't want to stop the action.
Yeah. My most memorable time that happened was when a player convinced his evil twin to switch sides. And he came up with an argument that would work on him. And I was like, this was a combat encounter?
I would go with it at that point.
Yeah, and that's what I did. That's what I did. I'm like, okay, it works.
Yeah.
I like to pause for, I always steer into that kind of thing and go, okay, you have horribly upended my plot. Well done. Congratulations.
Yeah,
now I have to go
that.
now I will look through my vast cast of NPCs and try to figure out how everybody is going to react to the incredibly weird thing you just did. But to give myself time to do that, because that can often take time, if something incredibly shocking has happened like that, then just reflect that in fiction. Have everybody inside the game, all the NPCs just go. And then maybe have the player try to explain himself. My best one was when one Requiem player character doused another one in white phosphorus.
Why?
Just because.
Where did you get the phosphorus?
It was a thing.
Group survived.
Soviet surplus.
I had one player shoot another player's pet dog.
Why would you do this?
So here's the thing. So we were fighting. So this is a mage game. So blame this one. So we were in the middle of Reign of the Exarchs, and we had taken a side plot in the one where I bound them. Bound in mage terms is essentially an old god of the
You're fired. An entity for the supernal realms that has been trapped on Earth for several millennia and is now like a mana-eating monster.
Right. So this particular one could only be resealed in its tomb by an act of supreme forgiveness. And
Oh my god!
I know it's going.
and so we were going through it, and we couldn't figure out how we had to do something terrible to someone at some point and get them to forgive it. And we were in the middle of this, and then the one player just ups and kills the other player's familiar. Just boom. And she, like, in and out of character, was like, what the fuck? And he was like, fuck you. Because he started ticking off everything that he had done for the entire Cabal throughout the course of Reign of the Exarchs. At one point, he pulled out his own eyes and put in these, like, 2 supernal artifacts, and that's what you do in Reign of the Exarchs, spoiler alert. And just going through all this, and he's like, at every point of this, I let you off the hook. Every point of it, I said it was the greater good. Now it's your turn. And she's like, you're right, I'm sorry. And that was it. And it was like, so just give the players a chance to explain themselves, give the players a chance to go through it and like work out the consequences of the character while you are simultaneously working out the consequences.
I'm always really forgiving of that kind of thing, like, you know,
Yeah.
well done for you for screwing my plot up, because honestly, I'm terrible for doing that as a player. Like, I've killed other player characters because because the bad guy of the Chronicle is their evil future self. I took the path of least resistance. So bang! I've gotten up to some terrible things.
That happened at a time.
At one point, it was the joke in my gaming group that all of my characters would have an invisible dragon following them around to kill my character the next time I pulled something. So, yeah, I just enjoy it. It's one of the few, like, as storytellers, you know, we spend so long planning out what's going to happen that to be genuinely surprised like that is actually a really good thing, and you know, just enjoy it and have everybody else go, what the hell did you just do?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we're at the end of our time. Thank you all very much for coming. And if you want to chat more about storytelling, we will be at booth 1201.
How long was booths open today?
I think they just closed.
I think they just closed actually.
We'll be there tomorrow. We'll be in the Wrecking Crew room over in, what is it again?
It's the
Marriott.
Marriott.
Thank you guys for showing up.